Um, so resilience in language learning refers to a learner's capacity to persist, to adapt, and to recover when facing challenges acquiring a new language, German in our case, on the following levels: on a emotional level, on a cognitive level, which means like the way we think, and on a social level. Um, and as I just said, I think the really tricky part comes mostly when I think some of you started learning German maybe abroad, in your home country, at some other point in your life before you moved here. And I think then you don't really have any social challenges you have to recover from. You don't really have much of emotional challenges either. Um, the only thing you might have to deal with is like cognitive challenges. But when we live in Germany, um, I think resilience becomes really essential. And I think most of you wouldn't be here if you were not, for some part or another, like struggling with this concept. And you just get like any kind of like you get frustration, you start to do like you avoid things. That's always a lack of resilience. So the question is, how can we improve that? And I think to wrap our head around what resilient means living in the target in Germany, there's like five things I think we need to take into consideration. Three of those we'll deal with today, and two we'll deal with next week. Um, I start by the two we do like next week. The first is to the ability to anticipate and avoid experiences that could result in unpleasant emotional states. Ability to anticipate and avoid. That's number one. We'll talk about this next week. Number two, that's a really tricky one. Understanding and reframing unpleasant experiences during or after they have occurred. So we couldn't avoid them. So now we have experienced them. So how do we understand them better and how do we reframe them so that they don't become long-term liabilities? And I think you have all made some sort of experiences, unpleasant experiences, that you probably had a hard time to understand or to reframe. And they have become, when we talk about the Deutschberg framework, I always call this luggage. And the longer we walk up that mountain, the more luggage we have. Yeah. And that's the stuff that's kind of undigested and it just like lingers with us and just, doesn't go away because we never really um, could treat it well and could like work through it in a proper way. Those are the two things we'll talk to about next week. Um, Today, number one, understanding the importance on actively cultivating key positive emotions. So for today's purpose, I have identified 8 positive emotions on which we will focus later. So we should, first of all, understand them. What do they do? What do they exist? Most of them, I think you're very familiar with. But also the part of actively cultivating them. That is maybe the part you're less familiar with. So we'll be talking about this today. The second is this idea in positive psychology. This is called a positivity ratio. So we're trying to work towards a healthy positivity ratio in the present and the near future. This is this idea that came up like 20 years ago. The idea that like in order to have like to flourish, we want to have like a good positivity ratio, which means like on every negative experience, you want to have at least 3, 4, 5 positive experiences or positive emotions in order to like balance that out because negative stuff, unpleasant stuff stays with us longer and more intensely. So you need more positive experiences to balance out one negative. That is called a positivity ratio. It's it is contest that's a contested concept to say. I will just put this out there, but I as a framework for us, we know like we're not psychologists and we don't have to do any research on this. I think this works as an idea. It is plausible. And the third one is, and again, we're talking about like building resilience in language for in German learning, living in Germany, is laying foundations for complex positive emotions in the more distant future. There's there's like positive emotions we have in the moment, it's just like you enjoy something, yeah. But then there's like much more positive experiences. Like think about you meet a friend and you like that person versus you meet your brother or like your sister, with whom you have a much deeper connection and a much deeper understanding. You have much more complex, hopefully positive emotions for your sibling or for your parents than you would have for like somebody you just met like a year ago. Yeah. So I think it's helpful to like differentiate between just positive, pleasant emotions in the moment and emotions that are much more complex and much more profound. And the question then is, what can I do in order to lay the seeds for those more positive emotions? And I will later tell you two stories. We'll do something a little different today. Well, I'll tell you two stories, and then we kind of reverse engineer what they actually meant. Um, let's have a look at this. It's like a little bit different approach we'll do in the second part of today's workshop. Let's see if you find this interesting and worthwhile. Um, okay, again, this is in the presentation. What are the major obstacles to building resilience? Um, there, I would say, oh, give me 1 second. I just realized that something was missing here. 1 second. Oop. Uh, okay. Uh, okay. What are major obstacles? Um, Number one, overemphasis on accuracy and competence. This is, I think, a topic we'll be talking about the whole 3 months. It's just like that most of us just focus way too much on being correct, on speaking accurately. We have this idea of like it's A1, A2, B1, B2. We're just going through this. And that is basically what matters the most. And then we neglect all the other broader learning experiences that are also a part of a successful language learning process. So just focusing on the competence instead of focusing all kinds of adjacent experiences. Then another obstacle for building resilience would be a lack of understanding of the learning process. And we talked about this in the first workshop. This leads to unexpected frustration and motivational decline because a lot of people are just unprepared for slow progress, the idea of habituation, of diminishing returns. You keep going to the classes, but you're less and less motivated. Um, and I think that is also something that if we know better about this, the orientation, that's why I do the Deutschberg thing, then we would have more resilience because we know what is happening to us. Third point, a neglect of psychological factors. That's why we have this class actually. Um, and emotional experiences and mostly predictable challenges are rarely addressed and or taken not seriously enough. That is true for language learners. That is true for language teachers, German teachers, and the institutions providing language classes. I think they all do not address or take seriously enough these questions. Yeah, I've been for a long time frustrated with the place I used to work, the Goethe Institute, where I still sometimes work, because I was like trying to tell them we need to do some mindset work, some orientation classes, and they just wouldn't listen to me. That was a major source of frustration for me for the last 3 years. I was like running against the wall. Other teachers also showed very little interest in this topic. I've tried, I've been doing these workshops for like a year and a half. I've tried to I invited teachers all the time to come to the workshops, and just one teacher ever came. Yeah. So it is really a lack of interest in this, like a complete neglect of the whole like psychological aspect of this journey, which I find terrifying, to be entirely honest. And I realize the more I talk about this and the more I talk to people about this, I realize that this is just a much bigger thing than even I had anticipated like 2 years ago. Um, and then the third one, sorry, the fourth is a lack of a clear plan. We talked about this also. Um, not enough learners actually approach language learning and its challenges in a systematic and well-structured way. And also, I mean, how could you? You don't really know how this works, how this goes. Like most of you learn this, do this for the first time as adults, learning a foreign language in another country. So how could you have a plan for something you haven't really ever done? So that's what I would say are the four major obstacles for building resilience: overemphasis on accuracy, lack of understanding of the learning process, neglect of psychological factors, and lack of a clear plan. Um, I will put you these, wait a second, in the chat. What I just talked about, I'll put this in the chat. Where's the chat? Here. Give me one second. Um, this is the first part of the presentation. And let me, hang on, show you hang on a second. Um, hmm, there we go. And just go through the question quickly. Also, just 3 questions I would like you to discuss. And I just put the PDF in the chat. Question number 1, we do this in pairs. What do you think about these ideas related to resilience in language learning? Question number 2, when you began learning German, did you think about any of these aspects? And if so, what did those thoughts look like? If you remember this, some of you had started learning German like 10 years ago, but maybe you remember. So has this whole aspect of resilience and like this whole like psychological aspects, positive psychology, was this ever on your mind when you started learning German or before you actually joined this course? And number 3, when and how did you notice that learning German and living in Germany would be psychologically more challenging than you had initially expected? Okay, I hope those questions are not too tough. As always, by talking about these things, you will realize if you have any questions. So first, I would let you talk in pairs uh, for 5 minutes. And then after that, if you have any questions, we can discuss those. Okay, so let's do um, some breakout rooms. If I find where is it? Here. Okay, as always, we do just by sheer chance. Okay, I'll see you guys in 5 minutes. Was? Nee. Das war noch nie mein Problem. Das war noch nie mein Problem. Das ist tatsächlich, das würde ich mir mal wünschen, dass ich mal das auf die ganze Leben kann. Any questions, any comments? Was it digestible, everything? Yeah, Tim is nodding his head. It's a good sign. Okay. If there's no Igor, everything okay? Everything understood? Yeah? Okay. Then I guess if Igor doesn't have any questions, I think we can go on. He's usually the guy always asking interesting questions. Okay, then let's go on from the idea of resilience into the topic we want to talk about today, which is the positive psychology, which is, in all honesty, I always thought this topic was kind of weird. And I started reading about this years ago, and I have to say, I don't know, maybe because I'm German, I don't know why. I never took this topic really seriously. Um, I don't know why, but let's see if today I think I'm getting it better these days than like a couple of years ago. What is positive psychology? And I think most of you have heard from it, have some idea about it. Um, it is something that started like 25 years ago, 30 years ago, um, but it really has like gotten into a lot of like modern psychology. It's really weird how like psychology has changed in the last 25 years towards more positivity, more like activating resources in people. That was not the case 25 years ago, which is really interesting. It has changed a lot. So positive psychology actually has had a huge success, a more like implicit success. It's also really interesting that positive psychology, which is can be defined as the study of human strength, well-being, and the conditions that enable individuals to thrive. That is positive psychology. And it's basically it was really en vogue in like the early 2000s, the first half of the 2010s. But in the last 10 years, it has been integrated in a lot of things, and it's not really such a big thing anymore. But it has gotten integrated in a lot of things. And last week, I talked a little bit about ACT, about acceptance and commitment therapy. A lot of positive psychology is in this kind of therapy. Um, it's the person that is usually most attached to positive psychology is a guy called Marty Seligman. It's a professor, I think, at the University of Pennsylvania. He used to be the president of the American Association for Psychology, and he's the one who like basically started this whole thing with the positive psychology back like in the late 90s. And he developed it in response to psychology's back then strong focus on deficits and pathology. It started with Freud, who just like focused on hysteria and all the weird stuff. And basically, of the whole like 20th century, psychology and psychoanalysis and focused very much on pathologies, deficiencies, deficits, people that were not well. And eventually the question was asked, why don't we worry more on things that make life actually worth living? Because there's also a huge tendency from Aristotle, I think it's in English, auf Deutsch ist Aristoteles, like back in the old Greeks, the Romans, even in medieval times, of like what actually is a life worth living? What is a good life? And so positive psychology basically says we want to use scientific methods, evidence-based psychology to find out what actually is a good life. And they didn't want to talk so much about happiness, because happiness is like not the actual term they wanted to use. They used at the beginning, and then later they moved to well-being. And well-being is much more than just feeling happy, obviously. Um, so the goal of positive psychology, the main goals are basically to understand and promote well-being, resilience, and optimal functioning, and as well as to identify and cultivate, and as we'll talk about today, strengths, positive emotions, engagement, and meaning in all aspects of human life. And Marty Seligman, he proposed a framework to think about this. And I will show you this slide, so we'll have a little bit of a better understanding of this. Um, you will, before I show you, you will find, if you've ever been to one of my workshops on basic psychological needs, you will find some very interesting parallels. And we'll start talking about basic psychological needs in 2 weeks, and we will come back to many of the things that are in this PERMA framework by Marty Seligman. And let me just show you what this looks like. Okay, so the PERMA framework consists of this is basically, those are the elements of well-being. What humans need in order to function well, to feel well, just a general, like to have a life that is worth living and a life that people enjoy. And all of them have like different importance for different people. Some people need more of that, others need more of that, but we all basically need this. And you have the P for positive emotions. That's something we'll focus a lot on today. Um, the second is engagement. Here, this whole positive psychology idea is very much influenced by this idea of flow. That means that we are deeply absorbed and involved in activities that capture our attention and skill. Um, that is also, we will focus a whole workshop on this aspect of engagement in February. The next PER is relationships. That's pretty obvious. It is really important for human beings to have supportive, trusting, and meaningful social connections. That is, I think, something that not quite a lot of people struggle with in Germany, in Berlin. That is something, by the way, that I was struggling with in Berlin. I was not very happy with my social life in Berlin either. So I was having a little bit of a hard time in that R category. Um, Again, this is also something we'll dedicate a whole workshop to later. Um, the next one is meaning. A feeling that one's actions in life are purposeful and connected to something larger than oneself. Also, really, really important for humans to have that. Also, something that is kind of difficult to find living abroad. Um, that is also the reason why you remember, like the Deutschberg framework, I was talking about the participation and that one day you have to like feel you are a part of this community where you live. And that is basically what I mean with meaning. You have to like understand, why am I here? What is my purpose here? Or am I just here because I don't want to be somewhere else? Yeah. So that meaning part is really, really important to really participate and feel like you're an integral part of the community that you've chosen to live in. And the last one, which Marty Seligman said was like the last one he actually integrated into the framework, is accomplishments. And this has, in different theories, has different names. It can be called the strive for competence, the strive for control. Um, and it basically means that humans need to pursue goals, develop competence, and experience a sense of achievement and mastery. You can see why this is important in a language learning context. Um, those five elements were chosen because they are intrinsically valuable. That means that they are worth pursuing in their own right. They are all empirically researchable, which is the new approach of this whole positive psychology thing. They actually did tons of research on that. Yeah. And they came up with like, how do we measure? How is this operational? How can we measure all of these things? And then in the end, with the idea, okay, now that we measured it, how can we actually improve it? And how can we also like have evidence for what works to improve those aspects and what does not? And the third part, they are all cultivable through intentional actions. That was also important when they came up with this framework. And the interesting part is that modern resilience research these days focuses much less on feeling good, on like feeling well in the moment, and much more on actually staying engaged, committed, and above all, we had this last week, flexible. The term is always these days is positive psychological flexibility. Um, yeah, that we feel engaged, flexible, and committed in the presence of difficulties and problems. This framework is really famous. I've heard this in all kinds of different courses and presentations and stuff. The PERMA framework really stands out as like the most well-known framework to think about positive psychology. And we will see a lot of this again when we talk about basic psychological needs, which are work a little differently, but is very much related to this topic. And another thing that this whole thing, they're using some terms that are also that maybe you've heard, that is languishing versus flourishing. Um, so basically, languishing, it is the difference between feeling really well and just existing. I don't know if there's any IKEA fans here. There's a really famous IKEA advertisement in Germany, and it says, lebst du schon oder wohnst du noch? Yeah? Wohnst du noch oder lebst du schon? And that's a little bit the difference here. Do you just live in your apartment? Like, do you exist in your apartment? Or do you actually live in your apartment? Yeah? And that's a little bit the difference between languishing and flourishing. So, languishing is basically you're not really failing, but you're not really thriving. Yeah? You have some energy, you're not sick or anything, you have low energy and declining motivation, and you continue to be apart, you continue to do something, but you're feeling a little stuck. Yeah, that is what they consider with like, and this is fascinatingly, I think, true for life, but also for the language learning process. So that's something they call languishing. And flourishing actually is a high well-being and active engagement, positive emotions, meaningful progress, moments of flow. If you're not familiar with this concept of flow, flow is basically when the level of the challenge meets your capabilities. Yeah, that is that you need everything you know and you can do. You need this to meet the demands of a challenge, and you actually are able to do it. And then you enter into a state of flow. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. It is something when things feel really good and you feel like, yeah, I can do this. I'm doing this. You can come into like flow in like speaking, just talking to someone or like doing something that you really enjoy doing. Um, for example, the runner's high, if you're familiar with this concept, when you go running for like a longer time, people experience a runner's high. That is also some sort of flow. Yeah. You're challenged, you're concentrated, you're doing great. Yeah. Everything is great. So that is, then you're flourishing. If this is something in your life, like a constant thing, you're feeling like the challenges that I have are, I can't actually do this because I have the capabilities, then you're experiencing a much more structural flow. And flourishing needs also like a sense of growth, purpose, and accomplishment. And I'll just show you this like little thing here. You notice like the suffering, the struggling, the languishing, and then like when you deepen the green, then you are flourishing. Those are just really useful terms because I think obviously you can struggle or you can suffer, yeah. And but what are the terms that we have for like being somewhere in the middle, yeah, and doing really well? And the terms introduced were languishing and flourishing. Very well-known terms in the positive psychology speak. Why this distinction matters? Um, Mental health is much more than the absence of problems. Yeah, feeling well is much more than not feeling like shit. Um, People, and maybe you have experienced this, you can feel fine while actually disengaged. And so, and the goal of holistic language learning, holistic means always like the whole thing, right? Not we don't only focus on grammar, on vocab, but like my understanding of holistic learning would be that we move from mere functioning, I'm able to do this is okay, I'm doing well, to actually thriving as a learner and as somebody who lives in Germany. And just like actually think, okay, what else do I need in order to actually thrive as a German speaker and as somebody who lives in this country? Okay, um, those are the PERMA framework and the idea of languishing versus flourishing. Hang on a second. Somebody posted something in the chat. Oop. Nope. Did somebody? No. Okay. Oh, okay, Christine, languishing in jail. Yeah. Um, but yeah, here it just means like doing okay. Yeah, kind of okay. Not terrible, not great, just kind of okay. Um, and I'll let you again for 5 minutes into I'll post it in the chat, the description of this. And again, there's 3 questions. Let's have a look at them. Um, how do you feel about the importance of positive psychology? How does it sound to you, the whole concept? Um, what do you think about the PERMA framework? Maybe don't talk too much about this. We'll talk a lot about this in February. When we talk about the basic psychological needs, we will be talking a lot about this PERMA framework as well. So maybe focus a lot on the third question, which is when you reflect on your own experience of learning German, in which respects are you maybe struggling? Where are you flourishing? Where are you languishing? Like, where would you put yourself on this little color scheme up there on the right, which you also have in the PDF that I just sent to you. Oops, sorry. Okay, let's give you all 5 minutes. You got the PDF. And does anyone have any questions? You don't have to have questions. You can also just make a comment. Just speak your mind, whatever comes.
Hi.
Hey, Moni. So, any comments, any questions?
I can share a thought.
Go ahead, please, Sydney.
In terms of the third question, to share experiences on where we're flourishing and languishing or so on, I was sharing that something I'm struggling with is with all the vocab that is being collected in the brain. I felt like from A1, I could really, like, in terms of speaking, I'm struggling to collect, to use the vocab that is in my brain to form sentences.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I noticed that I struggle. Like A1 was good, A2 got a bit harder, and now I'm in B1. I'm like, what? I feel like I forget so much, and so that's something that I'm struggling with.
Mhm. Well, that's more like a detail question. I would not, this is not really something where you're like languishing. This is more like a technical issue.
This
Um,
is why I wasn't gonna say it,
yeah.
but you wanted someone to say
But
something, so you got some words.
you're not alone with this issue, by the way. You're not alone. In the one-on-ones we had in the last couple of days, that was actually I always this is something I would attribute to the very much output orientation that a lot of us have, where we like always like think that I took a couple of classes and we don't get a little input, but we expect ourselves to have a lot of output. And I think the problem in this situation is very much the disconnect between you focused too much on output and you like expecting you basically, Sydney, you expecting that you're smarter than you actually are. And that you can be. I think that's a problem that a lot of educated people have. Like smart people, more educated people, I think tend to have this issue because we think I don't need the input, I just move straight to the output. And I just learn a couple of rules, I learn a little bit of vocab, and then I am ready to go. I just need to see a word once. I just need to see a grammar rule once, and then I can apply it because it's only 167 grammar rules and like 15,000 words. And since my brain is a supercomputer, I can just like put this right out. Yeah. Yeah. And we don't give ourselves the time to actually acquire the language and actually just, just like have input and just like let the language sink in. I think that is something that comes from. I will actually, I think in February I will do a little bit of a video on this. Let's see if that helps. But I think a lot of people empathize with you, Sydney. Other comments, other questions about the languishing, the flourishing? Is there anything else? Or should we just move on? Igor, yes.
Yeah, I just want to say that it's like very interesting concept to find out about that because especially when you realize that you were like languishing, but you didn't know the specific word or like the term that is actual like real concept in psychology. There's like another one, the flourishing. You think when everything is okay and you have nothing to complain about, there is like yeah okay like I'm going to classes like to visit the courses, but I don't like put so much and don't have any like idea of like growth or purpose or like engagement and you think it's completely okay, but now you see, yeah, of course, it's actually not. That there is actually a much better way, and it's very interesting to learn like now. Yeah,
It's actually an experience I think a lot of people that first come in touch with psychology have. It's like, wait a second, somebody thought about this the way I feel? People have written about this? Yeah. People have been thinking about this for 100 years. So yeah, welcome to the fascinating world of psychology. That also happened to me. I was like, wait, somebody this is a description of me. How does this person know that? Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. Other comments, other questions? Thank you, Igor. Then let's move on to I hope I'm not throwing too many illustrations at you now. I got a little bit carried away with the illustrations. Because I want you to visualize this a little bit. Let's see how that's why I'm also like staying with the presentation on, so that there's two more concepts I'm just going to throw at you, and then we'll move to much more like practical work and stories and actual talking about emotions. But before this, I wanted to like share two more concepts, just illustrations, like ways to think about this in a more metaphorical way. And the first one I want to share is this one, which I also find quite interesting. Um, it is basically the idea that, and this is wait, am I recording? Yes, I think I'm recording. It's basically the idea that more positive emotions brings more positive emotion, and more negative emotion brings more negative emotions. And the idea that we basically come into upward spirals if it's going really well, and then we come into downward spirals if things go really bad. And you see it starts at just like the middle, basically between 7 and 8. This is like the middle at contentment and boredom. That's like the baseline, basically. Contentment, boredom, that is like the baseline. And then the question is a little bit, in which way do you move? And what I find interesting about this concept is that positive, pleasant experiences and negative, unpleasant experiences, they can create a certain momentum. And maybe some of you have experienced this. Maybe you have been in one of those downward spirals or upward spirals, and they can go really low. If you have ever been in one of those, they can like go really low. So we have here the idea of emotional momentum, where emotional states tend to reinforce themselves. Um, and we can create an upward spiral towards greater well-being and resilience. And unfortunately, negative states can lead to a downward spiral if they remain unrecognized or unaddressed. Um, that is, and it can escalate. Like maybe you have experienced this at some point in your life, maybe in in a relationship maybe, or in a place where you were living and you're really unhappy, or if things were going really well and it's going up and up and up, you got getting lifted like an eagle in the air. So positive emotions bring more positive emotions, and negative emotions tend to bring more negative emotions. So what I want you to take away from this is there is a certain momentum, and we can use it or we can fall victim to it. And this is basically the basis for the, also apart from the PERMA framework that we just talked about, another really, really, really famous theory is, okay, the first illustration looks a little complicated, but I'll show it to you anyways. It's the so-called broaden and build theory. And what it basically is, that positive emotions, you broaden your horizon. You have novel thoughts, novel activities, novel experiences, novel relationships, and they then build resilience, social support, and that produces more positive, more positive emotions, which enhances your life and feel you more fulfilled. And then that brings more positive emotions. That is the broaden and build theory. The person proposing it was Barbara Fredrickson, and also an American psychologist, also really, really famous. She wrote some really beautiful books about positive psychology. One is, I think it's just called Love 2.0. And she's also the person, I think, who invented the term positivity ratio. Like she's like next to Marty Seligman, like the person, the researcher on positive psychology. And this explains how positive emotions support long-term well-being. Broaden means broaden attention, thinking, behavioral options to make you more flexible and creative in the moment. That builds over time, then lasting resources, psychological resilience, social connections, and learning capacity. And this little thing, it's just basically, it shows it's like a circle. Yeah. Positive emotions lead, you broaden your horizon, that then you build new relationships, you build resources, you build support, you build resilience. That leads to a better life, and that better life then leads to more positive emotions. It's basically the reason why we should focus on positive emotions, because they will lead us to more positive emotions. That's the whole like background of the broaden and build theory. And so the positive emotions do not just feel good in the moment, they help build the resources needed to cope with future challenges, the idea of this upward spiral. That's why I think it's warranted to have a whole workshop, a whole evening on positive psychology and positive emotions. This is, okay, I'll send you again the, where is it? Hang on a second, let me stop sharing. I'll send you the next PDF. And so let's have a look at the next questions. Hang on, I'll have to go back to this. So our next questions are, what do you think about this broaden and build theory? Is it plausible for you? What do you think about the idea of momentum and the existence of upward and downward spirals? Have you ever like experienced one? Are you maybe currently in one? Yeah. Is it something you're familiar with? Is something like you feel that this is true? And where do you see yourself in this model, in the scale we had, in this like spiral? Is there any, would you say this is where I am right now, this is where I am? So could you place yourself in this model at this very moment? Again, we'll take 5 minutes. Let me just stop the recording. Any questions, any comments on what we just spoke about? And maybe questions that came up in your discussion with your partner. about the spiral, downward spiral, upward spiral, and the broaden and build theory.
I have a question.
Yeah, Barry.
Uh, do we learn the techniques how from, for example, these negative thoughts come to positive, or when we are deep down in negative, which techniques can we use?
That is something we'll do after the break. We'll start looking at some ideas of what we could do. Yeah. If you aren't satisfied with the results of today's workshop, I can, for example, a book that I think is really interesting to give you more ideas about this would be, for example, Marty Seligman's Flourishing. I put it in the list. I have it as an ebook. Martin Seligman Flourishing. It's a classic. It has tons of ideas about what to do, and we will look into some of those possibilities that he suggests in order to actually turn this around, have a more meaningful life, have like a more like positive outlook on things. Thanks for the question, Party. Other questions on other comments? Christine, question: is it just about language learning or life in general? Oh, Seligman's book. Seligman's book has nothing to do with language learning. What we do in this course is basically there's nothing of what I do here. There is on most things there's no research. There's nothing. It's what I do is basically I take concepts from psychology, psychotherapy, anything basically, and apply it to language learning and the language learning process. And on most things, you don't find anything. So like nothing we do here is, I tailor it to language learning. Sounds like a big, yes, this is what this course is about. I'm working on it. There's so many things that are really interesting in this context. Okay, other questions, or should we just say we'll take a break till 8? That's like 12 minutes. That's enough to maybe have some more tiramisu. I had some tiramisu and my stomach hurts. Pro tip, don't have too much tiramisu before you have a class. Yeah, it's the number one mistake I keep bumping into. Let's do a 12-minute break then, and after the break, we get into the more concrete work with positive emotions, which to like, okay, see what seeds could I plant? What are the benefits? What do I want to harvest in like 5 years, in 10 years? So that's like the idea of like today, like reverse engineering a little bit these stories and these complex feelings that I had the pleasure to experience, and that I hope that some of you will also experience in the not so distant future. Then we have the idea of belonging and connectedness. This is what the workshop will be about on February 7th in Berlin. So before it was on an interpersonal level, and now it is on a collective level of feeling that you are part of something and you belong here and that you are an integral part and an important part of this community. I will tell you a story. I think some of you know it already. I will tell it to you later, of a story of very, very deep belonging and connectedness that I experienced once in being in Spain. Then a really interesting feeling is the feeling of awe. A couple of years ago, I read a really interesting article in the Spiegel about this. In German, we call this Ehrfurcht, which is a like honor angst. It's a funny word, Ehrfurcht. Awe is a complicated feeling, and when you talk to people about this, they sometimes have a hard time to actually say, "Oh, I think I never experienced this." The feeling of awe is is a feeling that there's something happening that is greater than yourself. Um, People would typically experience this, for example, when their first child is born, or when they are, for example, I give you an example for awe and what it means in a language learning process context. When I was living in France, some of you might know I lived for about 4.5 years in France in the early 2010s. And I lived 6 months of the island called La Réunion. It's in English, it's the Reunion Island. It's east of Madagascar. And it's a really crazy island. It's a very intense island. And I lived there for 6 months. And there's a part of the island which is completely cut off from the rest of the island. You can't drive there. You need a helicopter to get there, or you walk there. And there's about 2,000 people living in this valley, completely away from the rest of the world. And it was founded by slaves that ran away in the 19th century. And you can walk up there, and then there's like this big wall around it, like natural, like a collapsed volcano, and you walk around it. And I was with like some friends of mine back then, like French friends of mine, and we walked over there. And I remember this feeling of standing there and talking with my friends, seeing the sunrise over there. And I was just, this is so beautiful. This is so amazing. I can't believe I'm here. And the reason why I'm here is because I learned French, because I lived in France, because I moved here. And all of this is only possible because I speak French. This whole feeling I'm having right now is only possible because I speak French. And maybe we sometimes need experiences like this to fully understand, why are we learning this? Why are we doing this? To place ourselves and our experience into a much greater context. And the feeling of awe, I think, is one of the most formative and one of the most beautiful feelings in the moment. They feel great, but they are also really formative in the time after experiencing it. A fascinating feeling. Think about this. How could you use this feeling for learning German and like living in Germany? I think that's a great question. Um, Again, I never planned this. It just happened to me. But I think it won't happen probably if we don't look for it, if we don't strive for it. Um, I was lucky enough that it happened to me without anything doing. Um, then also pride. We'll talk about this also a little bit more in February. Um, Competence-based, self-affirming. We talked about this last week a little bit when I said, okay, why are you a good German learner? And it was basically a little bit tapping into the feeling of pride. And a lot of you described it, oh, this is really pleasant. I would have never asked myself that question. It was really pleasant to talk about this, and you were experiencing a certain amount of pride. And I think very often, and in a second, we come to savoring positive experiences. Sometimes people make us compliments. Sometimes something happens where we are invited to feel pride. And way too often, we refuse to feel it. And instead, we should be savoring it. We should dive right into it. Yeah, we should not be afraid of those positive emotions. Yeah, we need them to balance out the negative emotions. Instead, we just get rid of them. We don't allow it. We don't allow us this feeling to have. And I think that is something wonderful if we just other people affirm us, and we can also just feel that we have accomplished something, and that we can be proud of ourselves for having putting all this work. And yeah. And the last one is the feeling of gratitude. That can be other oriented, other people, or context oriented, that you that you're grateful for things in your life, context like social stuff or whatever it can be. And as a matter of fact, the gratitude is the one that I want to start with. Pari was asking about some more concrete examples of what to do. Before we get into this, just a couple more things on this idea of savoring positive emotions. And we'll get back We'll be talking the rest of today, we'll be talking about these 8 emotions: enjoyment, curiosity, inspiration, friendship, belonging, awe, pride, and gratitude. And what we could do to enhance them or like have them more often. Let's get to the idea of savoring. That is also in the book Flourishing. And again, it's kind of obvious. Like a lot of things, it's kind of obvious, but then again, maybe we need to be reminded of it. Savoring basically is the ability to notice, deepen, and prolong, and maybe repeat positive experiences, allowing them to be fully registered by ourselves and build lasting psychological resources beyond the current well-being. Yeah. And how can we do this? And Marty Seligman, he proposes 6 ways to practice savoring. Something we'll do today, which is share positive experiences, talk about what went well and why it mattered. Social resonance that we like get from other people. Yeah, that sounds great. That's really important. And then we can, by telling the story, we can relive it. Second, a mental replay that you can relive positive moments in detail. That is something you can probably do like in a journal. When you go through, and I'll suggest a journaling exercise later, you can relive them in the evening, for example, and just say, okay, what great things did happen today? And then you go through those situations again. Instead of focusing on like bad stuff, you focus on positive stuff and you do a mental replay. Then you can express gratitude. You reflect on what or who made the experience possible. I will give you in a second a possible way of just really getting into gratitude, because I think there's not that many feelings that feel so great than telling somebody why you're grateful to them. And you do actually you kill 2 flies with 1 stone. You make yourself really happy, and you make the other person also really happy if they know how to savor this feeling of pride. Gratitude is your side, and pride will be then the side of the other person. Then the sensory focus, you can attend to sight, sounds, and body sensations when you replay them, or just I sometimes remember like feelings that I had. For example, the feeling of awe. There's a bodily sensation part to it, that like a tickling, like a it's really hard to describe, but there's even a bodily sensation to certain feelings, and also like reliving them, focusing on them, just making them deeper and more meaningful. You can also like listen to your body, or like watch your body doing this. And then pause and stay with that. This is what I just said about people making us a compliment, how great our German is. Just resist rushing past it and just enjoy it. Something when it goes well, just stay with it. Yeah. Enjoy the positive emotion. Yeah. And just in German, we have this word like gönn dir. Yeah, it's an expression that's like is pretty recent. I've only been hearing it for like maybe 2 or 3 years. Gönn dir means just like have a good time, knock yourself out. Yeah, sich etwas gönnen. Yeah, that do you know this term? Hang on, sich etwas gönnen. Let me write this in the chat. Also sich, hang on, sich etwas gönnen. That's the expression. And then in German, we say always, when, for example, like have a good time, we say gönn dir, which is terrible grammar. It's grammar. 5 years ago, this would have been unacceptable, but today it is totally fine to say, yeah. And people say gönn dir, which means enjoy. Yeah. And there's something, sich etwas gönnen means just to really to pause and consciously enjoy something. That means sich etwas gönnen. Yeah. So if you want to like instead of saying enjoy to people, just say gönn dir. Yeah. Okay. So let's go into anticipatory savoring. That's like the 6th. It's like you consciously enjoying the positive anticipation. Yeah, let's just go over this. 2 proven exercises to cultivate gratitude. Now, Pari asked about like concrete examples, and don't worry, we'll get back to this in a second. But now I just want to dive a little bit more into the just 2 ideas about gratitude. And Marty Seligman, he do 2 things. One is the gratitude letter. I have to say, when I read this, I was like, I understand it's a great idea. I'm not sure I would do it. I think it's really worth your time. And I'll get into a second why. So what it is you write a letter to a person whom you have never properly thanked, but who played a special role during your journey to the German language. That can be a teacher, a tandem partner, a classmate, host family, whatever. And what they're suggesting is write a letter of 300 words. Oh yeah, there's somebody, yep. Write a letter of 300 words where you reflect on your journey and where you show gratitude towards that person and the role they played. And I think it's a great exercise to reflect on your own process and make a huge gesture towards another person, but mostly it helps you to just see your own process from a very, very, very positive point of view, from a grateful point of view. And I think that is really interesting. And so you describe specifically how this person helped you, what difference that person made for your learning process, and how it influenced your motivation and confidence. And by describing this, you are tapping into all of these feelings again. If you describe how well his influence was on motivation, you will relive this motivation again. Yeah, by like the influence he had on your confidence, you will relive this confidence. So writing this letter helps you to just dive into those emotions you're describing back in. And it's they've done tons of research on this, and they said it's amazing how showing gratitude has a huge effect on people. It connects you with someone else. Maybe you reconnect. What they say is you should also meet with the person and read the letter to that person. You can also just send it, but I think it's writing a letter is a huge part, and actually then like sending it to the person or like reading it to them. I think this is a really beautiful idea. If you feel like this could work for you, I will send a little bit like a sheet out tomorrow where you can try this and do this. The second is something maybe some of you are familiar with. It's called 3 Blessings. It's basically a gratitude journal for German learners. And it's basically every evening you write down 3 things related to your German learning or your life in Germany that went well that day. For example, understanding something, having a really good conversation, noticing progress, whatever. Also, this is important. Don't just write down 3 things that went well. The other day I was talking to a person, she's like, yeah, every day I sit down and write like 5 things that went great. It takes me like 30 seconds. I was like, well, great, but that's not okay, that's good. But the second part is not just writing it down, but in also to relive and mentally replay those situations and those feelings. You would also have to answer the question, why did this good thing happen? What did I do to make this happen? What did other people do to make this happen? Yeah, so put it into a larger context. This exercise has been very influential. You find it in a lot of like journaling exercises and programs and stuff. And it is originally called 3 Blessings. Something from a personal story. So my girlfriend and I, we do on a more or less regular basis, we do something that we call a check-in. And the check-in always starts with things that we are grateful for. And I have noticed that I'm terrible at being grateful. And since I've never really focused on it, I never really thought about it. So like the first couple of times we did this, I just didn't know what to say. I was like, okay, what am I grateful for? I guess there's nothing to complain about. That's not good enough, says my girlfriend, and say I. Um, so And over time, that's why I would recommend you doing this for like at least a week or 10 days. It takes practice to see the good things in our lives. And I started doing this like a year ago with my girlfriend, and now I focus on it much more. I focus on it much more in life because I know I have to talk about it at some point. So I make mental notes to think, oh, this is really well. This is really well because I have to write it down at some point or I have to speak about it. I will focus more on it, which then means I have more attention on it, which then means it plays a bigger role in my life. And Marty Seligman says like a lot of people who start doing this, they don't give it up for like a long time because they just really, really enjoy it and it brings so much positive energy to their lives. Check it out. That's a possibility. The three blessings exercise. Okay, that was a lot of things. Um, I would say, I would say I let you go into a breakout room for like 5 minutes. I don't have any question prepared for the breakout room. Maybe just express a little bit what goes through your head at this point after everything you just heard. I can tell you I spoke much longer than I had anticipated for this part, but I hope you don't mind. I give you 5 minutes to just like think a little bit about the things you just heard, and then we'll move to another exercise. I'm afraid we don't have enough time today for everything I have prepared, but that is fine. 5 minutes, breakout room, talk about everything you just heard, the gratitude. Don't talk so much, just talk about what you want. What goes through your head. I give you 5 minutes. Hang on a second. Wait, let me just stop.
I want to say something.
Please.
I think, at least for me personally, it is hard to say good things out loud. Nevertheless, saying good things about language learning process. So, in order to talk about gratitude in that area, I am not sure if even it is possible for me. Because most of the time, like as most of other people, it is really easy to talk about negative things.
Mhm.
It is harder to talk about positive things. But showing gratitude about my process, it feels kind of embarrassing for me to say things out loud.
Mhm. Uh, I know exactly what you mean. And I have to say, I'm also I had to learn this in the last couple of years. And I think I was telling you the story of like in mediation, we always had to tell like what is going good in our lives. And I had a really hard time just like saying I could always tell what I was complaining about, it was not going well, but what's actually going well in my life is I had a really hard time. Moni, if I may say so, even I have learned it. So I think there's hope for you. It it might be it might be a longer process, but I think if you set the intention, I want to be a person who is much more positive, who can speak about positive things, who can speak about like with gratitude about things. I think it is something that is worthwhile to be pursued. And maybe if you have any American friends, it seems to come very natural to them. Yeah. Everything is fantastic, awesome, and incredible. Yeah. But for other people, it's a little more like Germans or maybe Persians. We have to study this a little bit and have to actually set the intention of like practicing this more often. But it can be learned. I'm doing it much more often than, for example, 5 or 6 years ago. But it's a process. It really is a process. And it's unpleasant at the beginning. And it will stay unpleasant for a while.
I think it gets easier if the people around you or the environment is also doing the same thing. So it feels weird when I'm like talking to my Persian friends and I'm talking with gratitude and they will also be shocked. So,
And at some point, we will talking about, oh God, I forgot what this word means, but like shaping your social environment a little bit. For example, if you only have friends who think Germany is a pain in the ass. The German language sucks, and Germans are really unfriendly. If everyone around you says that, you will end up believing it. Yeah. So really, it's maybe at some point we have to curate a little bit our social environment in a way that's good for us. Yeah. This is again we can follow down these people down a downward spiral, or we can say, you know what? That's not my kind of people. I don't want to talk this way. Yeah. It's a choice we make.
True.
Yeah. Other comment. Thank you, Moni. Other comments, questions about this? Igor,
It
go
might
ahead.
sound maybe like a little like repeatable again, but just while talking, we both like realize with the person I talk with that both have like nothing to say in terms of gratitude. Like it's really difficult to come up with anything specific, and because you always focused on or like what do I lack? Like what do I need to correct? What else should I improve? But it's really a skill, yeah, that might be that I have to be learned some way, and I am not so sure because when I like think about okay, like what I have to say like to gratitude, I also like it will take some long time to do it, and but it can definitely improve. I think
And
the
Igor,
perception of
to elaborate on this, I think some people are always afraid of like getting from, like being really critical, and because they're afraid of the opposite. The opposite is something that people call toxic positivity, where like everything is great and nothing needs to be regarded in a skeptical way. Everything is just awesome and great all the fucking time, And you don't want to get there. And if you are the way you are right now, Moni, you're not in any danger to get there. Yeah. So don't be afraid of like turning into one of those people. Yeah. That's the extreme opposite. Yeah. It's called toxic positivity. It's something in Germans don't have. Generally, yeah, it is more like an American disease, I would say. Tim, I hope you don't mind me saying that, or Sydney. Yeah, it's an American invention. So, yeah, I don't think we are immune to this on the European continent. Um, any other questions, comments about this? Then let me tell you one story, actually. Uh, exactly. It was in the 2000s, I think, Christine, or in the early 2000s. But yeah, I remember that. I will show you one thing, and it's about okay. You see some photos here. I was like, you know what? I talk all the time about psychological concepts. Maybe it's time for a story. And this is, I always refer to my time living in Spain, my time living in France, my time living in the US, maybe. I lived in Spain for 1 year. And as you might maybe know, I speak fluent Spanish. I go to Spain all the time. I love the country. And when I was living in Spain, I was really getting into the history of the Civil War. And as you might know, there was like a massive, very gruesome civil war in Spain in the 1936 to 1939. The conservative, religious, fascist faction won the war. And then you have like a whole part of the Franco regime, and then you have the it's called the transition, the years like back to democracy, and then like the war of memory. And how is this time remembered? Because in Spain, this is very different remembered than, for example, the 1930s are in Germany. Yeah, it's just much more unclear in Spain. It's much more ambiguous. And I got really absorbed by this like idea of like the battle about the soul of a nation. Um, and I got really, really, really deep down into the Spanish Civil War. And I read about this stuff. This is a really terrific book, by the way, the one you see here, Anatomía de un Instante by Javier Cercas. One of the best history books I've ever read in my life. It is about the failed coup d'etat in Spain in 1981. Um, it's referred to as F-23 because it happened on February 23rd. And And I was reading all these books, and then I started visiting places. And I went around and I visited, for example, the ruins that you see in the right, the lower part. This is a town called Belchite, which is in northern Spain, just outside of Zaragoza in the north. And they just left the city in ruins and they built the city anew next to it. And I went there a whole day, and I was actually, it's like a fascist meetup place. And I went there and I was just hanging out with like Spanish fascists, talking to them about their perspective on the Civil War, because people go there and just like see this, and it's like a destination for like Spanish fascists to hang out. At least it was like back in the day. And I was just talking to these people. I was like, okay, let's hear their story. This is really interesting. And then what you see on top, this is Franco's tomb. I also went there. And it's just, like going to places like this, meeting people there. Who goes there? Who visits places like this? Talking to people that visit places like this. I would never go to like a German, like fascist rally and talk to people. I couldn't. But I can't do this in another country because I'm much less involved. And so I went around places in Spain that were like really linked to this. And I talked to so many people about this. And because I went to those places, I talked to other people about this. And then I had more conversations about the conversations I had visiting those places. And it's just a cascade of like conversations about something that just started with like an interest I had in like a book. And and what you see on the left, this is actually a sign of the fascist in today's Belchite. This is like the fascist symbol, and it's still in there. Yeah, like 100, like 80 years later, they still have these signs, and people walk by there, and then I ask people, I interview people about this, and you have so I had so many conversations in my life in Spain about this period of time. Everyone has an opinion about it. Everyone loves to talk about it to a foreigner. And I just had so many conversations, connections with people because I read a book. That's how it started. And what I'm trying to tell you is sometimes it's worth going down a rabbit hole because you never know where the rabbit hole will take you. Yeah? Be interested in something. Follow that interest. Yeah? Make it something about this country, something that you can connect over with. Yeah? And it will pay off in the most bizarre ways that I can. Yeah, I've been doing this for many years, and it's just, yeah, it's something that I'm proud of, that I think of very fondly, that I've made friends with. And it all started with like an interest in a weird aspect of Spanish history. And little secret, there's a lot of weird aspects of German history. I, I don't want to push you in any kind of direction, but there's tons of interesting stuff that happened in Germany in the last, let's say, 100 years. Yeah? Um, and there's a lot of things that people want to talk about if you ask them nicely, if you start a conversation, if you show interest. Just a thought. Um,
Say something.
let's, yes, Moni.
Well, sometimes it is not possible, what you just mentioned, like a memory that you had. So I told you before I came here when I was 15 and I went to this Goethe camp for A1, and one of the tutors there asked me, "Oh, so have you learned anything from Germany? And do you know anything like from the history?" And I was 15, but I was really interested in history. And I said, "Yeah, I've read the book My Kampf."
Oh.
And he stopped me right there. Okay, we are not supposed to talk about this. Thank you. Sometimes conversations cannot happen in that way.
I mean, yeah, I think Germany, like, we're a little more, yeah, I know what you mean. I know it's it's also not a very interesting book, but that's a different question. But I hope I made the point. Let's do the following. We have like 12 more minutes. I would like to have another hour because we don't have covered everything I wanted to cover. but let's do the following. We have 10 more minutes. I would suggest the following, and I call this in German, it's Gefühlskarussell, yeah, the carousel of emotions. Tons of emotions. You remember those 8 emotions we had? And now let's do the following. Up, wait a second. Up. So we have 7 breakout rooms with 7 emotions. And each breakout room will have 2 to 3 participants. And we will not do 5 rounds of 5 minutes each because we don't have the time to do this. What we'll do is we will do 2 rounds of 4 minutes that we can do. And yeah, okay. So you will just pick an emotion that you want to talk about. And I will give you the questions in a second. And I have to hang on a second. Give me 1 second. I'm a little overwhelmed with the technology here. Here we go. Neu erstellen. Okay, okay, give me 30 seconds. I just have to do something. I have to like name the rooms. Okay, let's look. What were the other feelings we had? Up. Inspiration. That's why you need a personal assistant. To this pride. And the last one would be okay. Okay, let's have quickly a look at the. Hang on, I have to. How does this work? So you'll pick a room with like the topic with a feeling, and we talk about the following questions. What is your experience with and relationship to this feeling in general, the feeling that you pick in the breakout room? Where do you see the connection between this feeling and learning and speaking German? And what relevance has this feeling had, or does it have for your process of learning German and living in Germany? That is what we'll look at. Let me get I will put in the chat, I will put these questions and a little bit more of information. So you have the PDF now in the chat. And you'll also have the questions in there, and we'll do 4 minutes, maybe 5. Let's do like 5 minutes more today. Okay, I hope you have the time till 9:05. And let's pick